All right. So let's get in here. We're going to get everybody in to the lesson. I'm going to click start now. If you didn't meet me last week in our webinar, you're meeting me today. And I'm Carrie. I do a lot of product marketing here at Quizizz. I am a former third grade teacher. I love Lord of the Rings. I live on a farm. You may even hear some animals in the background. I've got a dog behind me. Usually, if this was a webinar in the summer, you'd hear my rooster. And I am actually a certified master beekeeper when I'm not teaching you all. So in today's session, we're talking all about standards alignment with tech. And the first thing we're going to dig into is like, why do teachers not use the resources they already have? Like you have a curriculum, it's standards aligned. Why do teachers go out and try and find resources like Quizizz? And how can we make that experience better? And then we're going to talk a little bit about standards alignment on tech. I'm going to show you some of the latest features that have come out this year related to standards alignment. So how you can generate from standards, search from standards, and finally, I'm actually going to have Justin unmute toward the end of our webinar to showcase all of our reports on standards because he has a bunch of great examples that he can share. So first, let's talk about like, why do you not use the resources you already have? And I have a question for you. Has your admin ever asked you to use curriculum with fidelity? So we're going to dig into this. I don't know if your admin has ever said the words with fidelity to you. Back when I was teaching, my principal would say that all the time. We need to use our curriculum with fidelity, Carrie. But I was struggling with a lot of things as a teacher, like bringing in other resources because not all of my students were actually on grade level. That was one of the biggest battles with me. So is this something that you hear? Give me an answer in our poll. Let me know. Do you hear it all the time? Maybe never. If you're one of those never folks, I want to know. You must be so lucky. One year, I had a principal who told me fidelity was the word of the year. And you know that's a scary time in education, especially if you're a teacher, because as teachers, we're just trying to use as much as we can to reach our students wherever we can. Um, got 30 responses. I've got a few folks. Click your answer. It's okay. There's no right or wrong answer. You've got less than a minute left. And if you want to add thoughts on this, you can even share them in the chat because I don't know. Some people call the word fidelity the F word in education. Um, oh, I love this. Teachers do not use because they may not know how, and students not on grade level, too time consuming, doesn't meet standards or fidelity. Absolutely right. I won't read that comment out loud, but that is hilarious. Absolutely. All right. We're going to see our results here in about 15 seconds. I learned my lesson from last week. I only gave you 30 seconds to answer a poll, and now I'm trying to give you longer. Let's see. We've got 3 seconds here. Last chance to get in these answers. All right. Ooh, it's showing me my leaderboard. Let's see. Never. You all are so lucky. I love this. Teachers don't use their resource because they don't have time. That's a good call out, Angela. Some of you have an admin who says always. A lot of sometimes, like you hear it sometimes. That seems pretty accurate and pretty average for most of us. So with this question, write your response for me. If you have a curriculum, what are those things that actually do prevent you from using it? What problems do you have with those curriculum resources? Like, what is the biggest, hardest part for you? I know for me, it was differentiation. So if I had, like one year, remember I had almost 50% of my students reading below grade level. And using my on grade level curriculum was really, really tough because the level of intervention that was included within it just didn't reach half my class. And even when I had like this, I had curriculum that I did actually like to use. But whenever I was going out and finding something additional, there was usually a reason for that because there's some sort of gap somewhere, whether it was with the curriculum or maybe with a student or for some other reason. It's not always appropriate for your students, too easy or too tough. Access and time. You helped write the curriculum. One problem, we don't have enough time in the semester to use it all. Oh my goodness, yes. We all know that pressure of like trying to cover the curriculum before the end of the semester, before testing. I like I like these. These are great. I like to be able to edit and personalize mine. And your Go math doesn't really allow. I've had that exact same problem. New labs each year. Students are either lower or above curriculum levels. Uh, you need to dedicate hours to looking for appropriate resources, or the curriculum is boring. Absolutely. I had a curriculum in science where, in order for us to introduce gravity, I had to use it with fidelity. And the fidelity part was doing a script where I was asking my students to drop a book and then saying, "That's gravity." And I remember my students saying, "Mind blown, Mrs. Swales." And I was like, oh no, because it felt too easy, too hard for your special education students. Absolutely. Differentiation. You have a lot of students below grade level. We all have more students below grade level now than I think we did 10 years ago. I love this. You don't want to be a mile wide and an inch deep. Yes. These are great responses. And these are all reasons that it's really, really hard. And I think one of the hardest parts about when you leave that curriculum is how do you find stuff that's actually standards aligned or even rigorous enough for your students? Because we can all go out and find something that will kind of get the job done, but sometimes it feels like busy work. Or sometimes we don't know if that resource, maybe it's a free worksheet that we downloaded online. And is that really as standards aligned as we need? It might not be. So these are all great answers. These are things that we've heard at Quizizz about, like, why is using your curriculum hard? Some of you mentioned this. If many of your students' knowledge about a topic is 1 to 3 grade levels below the material you have, ooh, error there, I'm so sorry. Would you readily teach curriculum that was built for grade level competence? It would be really tough because you know those students aren't going to be able to work with that curriculum. Or some people say there are interventions that are happening outside of the curriculum while managing like tier 2 level interventions in the classroom is difficult. You don't have the resources needed. I often struggled with that where I could teach the whole class my main curriculum, but then once we got into work time or small groups, I didn't have the resources I needed to support those students who were below grade level or even above grade level. And then there's that call out to like some curriculums just don't have the interventions levels that are needed. I know I've had curriculum where the suggested interventions were pretty minimal. It was like maybe 1 or 2 questions that were lower or higher, which isn't enough for our students. The good thing is that like there are ways that we can solve for this. One would be short pre-tests. Can actually use standards line data at that point to point at what students, what to highlight for students. So the more we're doing pre-testing ahead of a unit, we can get feedback on that data and like customize that curriculum. But we all know that. But what's really hard there is that sometimes we do that, but going through and digging through that data and seeing it all, it's really hard to know, are these aligned with the standards of this next unit or not? The next one is that we can ensure that additional curriculum resources are easily aligned with grade level standards, or if a student is working at a standard below that, we can ensure we have something that's aligned there. And we can deliver a curriculum in a way that's easily adaptable for student needs. Somebody mentioned that earlier, that they like to customize. So we're going to start talking about how this works on Quizizz. I'm going to show you a little bit about just generating with standards and what does that look like on the Quizizz platform. So let's dive in. You're going to want to follow along on your Zoom screen. But right now I am actually in Quizizz. Now, when you enter Quizizz, if you're new to it, your screen will look a lot like mine. Here's your explore page where you can start finding resources. But if we're talking about generating from standards, what we're trying to do is say, wow, something I have is lacking and I need to create something, but I also need to ensure it's standards aligned so that when you have that admin who says, oh, it looks like you're using other resources, you can say, don't worry, they're standards aligned. So where we go with that in here is actually to Quizizz AI. And then the easiest way to start doing standards generation in here is actually from this option, which is create questions from a topic, prompt, or excerpt. We added something this year that includes the standards, which is pretty cool. So if I go in and I type, let's pretend I'm teaching fifth grade science, I'm going to do weather preparedness. And then I'm going to come in here, I'm going to go science. I'm going to go fifth grade. I've got my NGSS. I'm going to come down here to my weather and climate. And I like this one. This is maybe the one my unit is working on. Make a claim about the merit of a design solution that reduces the impacts of weather-related hazard. I'm going to click done. And then I can select the number of questions. I've got the subject and grade level in there. I can even select the depth of knowledge to ensure that the questions are not just multiple choice and that they're actually really starting to dig into what people know. So generating from standards like this is actually free for everyone. So you can see it's pulling in all of my standards here. It's even marking them on my questions. And do we have standards for every state? We have, I believe, Common Core right now, TEKS, NGSS, and we're ready to add more. So I think part of what you need to do is reach out to us and say, hey, we need these ones. Where did you find, okay, you missed a step. Where did you find the make from standard? If you go back in to the Quizizz AI menu and click work from prompt or topic, then there's a little standards button in there. If your standards are not listed, can they be typed in? You know, that's a great question, and I'm actually not sure. I wonder if one of our team members can look into that and ask and answer it for you in the chat. So I've got my NGSS here. You can see I've got a bunch of different questions here. They even put in images, which is pretty cool. So now I can continue to my editor. If I didn't like the ones that they gave me, I could regenerate. And then from here, I could actually make these more complex. We can do a little bit about what we talked about last year. And we can, or not last year, last week, sorry. We can talk a little bit about last week. So I could come in here and I could actually translate this for my multilingual students. I could add similar questions. Maybe there's some grammatical errors that I want to fix, or maybe I want to make some of these a little bit more complicated. Maybe I want to add something that I didn't. Thank you, Justin. So if your state isn't there, just email support so we know to add them. Because we want to add more. So you tell us what standards you need, and then we'll get them in here so that you can show that these align for you. So I've got this whole 15 question quiz aligned to exactly what I want to teach. I love this. It's covering all of these different topics. I can hit publish and then I'm good to go. So that's one way we can generate. And you know what's pretty cool is that we could even generate on other topics as well. So if I go back here to my Quizizz AI, again, if you missed this, create questions from a prompt, and then you put your prompt in here, and this is our button where we get to select those standards. So you could come in here and pick almost anything. I could do math, third grade, Common Core, and maybe what I want to do is measurement and data. So I can even look at it this way. Solve problems using measurement. I want to do geometric measurement and area because I know that was always something that was really tough for us to squeeze in. If you don't have a Quizizz account, there is a free version, yes, and you can do this on the free version. So I can come in here and say, my students need to practice and relate multiplication and addition to area. Maybe they need to measure areas by counting unit squares. These are two good things for me to pair together that are the standards. And you can see my standards are right there. I would use this tool anytime I was doing review for my students, especially if you get to like a test prep time period where you want to review things that you already covered at the beginning of the year. This is a great way to do that and not have to reinvent the wheel or reuse stuff your students have already done. So This part up here you can actually see is optional. So I can also just put in my standards here. And I could use this to provide additional instructions. So maybe what I like here, I love this call out real life scenarios. Because we know that our students actually like that. Maybe I'm gonna pick less questions and hit continue. So now I can see that I'm doing this for Common Core Math. It's generating something really quickly. It's giving it in real world scenarios that my students can relate to when they might actually have to calculate area, which is one of those things as an adult that we do actually have to use. So they've got questions about calculating a garden. These are pretty cool. So I can add more questions. This is giving me, maybe I want something, this is a little bit too complicated, right? My students don't know feet squared yet. So that's maybe not a third grade question that they're giving me. Some of these are just too complicated, these extra questions that AI wants to ask. But this is a great one. So I can add that one. Yes, real life questions make them much longer, which makes reluctant readers shut down. And you know what's cool is that you could actually launch this quiz with accommodations, which we showed you last week. So if you've got reluctant readers or students who are behind on their reading skills, you can actually set this up with read aloud for all your students and have it read to them so that there's less of a burden on them to worry about reading being a blocker to showing their knowledge. All right, let's talk about searching by standard a little bit. All right, if I want to go, maybe I don't want to have to generate something. And instead, what I want to do is actually just find something that fits a standard. So I'm gonna pick actually an 8th grade math standard from Teaks and see what happens. I'm gonna just come up here to the search bar and type this in and see what Quizizz comes up with. Because Quizizz has actually been going in to our library and tagging some of the stuff for you so that now you can just search and find it on your own. So now I can see I've got a whole bunch of different options here that are all aligned to a Teaks standard for 8th grade. So I can practice graphing. I can come in here and pick either individual questions by hitting add here. So maybe this is one I want. Maybe I want to find something else here. See what happens. I can look at this entire one. I can edit it. So if I want to, I'll hit copy and edit. I can make this my own now. And I can use AI again to enhance this and make this easy. But now you know it's got these tags in here that everything that you're doing here is super aligned to everything that you want to accomplish in the classroom. So if you have your principal or your curriculum person coming in and saying, how do you know that these resources are good or bad? How do you know that they're rigorous? How do you know that their standards aligned? You have to worry less here with that. Whereas with something like teachers pay teachers, you can say that it's standards aligned, but do you know if it's rigorous enough? Is that easy to differentiate? So here we can easily come in and differentiate these. If I decided that maybe I didn't like one of these questions, Angela, I can easily just come in and say like, oh, I don't want this one. Yeah, you can up the depth of knowledge level here. So I showed a little bit of this last week with these enhancements, but now I can take things here. Maybe I need to simplify things. Maybe I need to add a narrative. Or what I like to do, which is add my student's name in all of the questions, especially in math. Maybe what you want to do is add answer explanations for all of these. That way, if the students are working on this independently, there's an explanation to each one. And that way you can focus on helping the students that need the most support while they're working on an assignment. And you can let Quizizz help explain things to those that can work a little bit more independently. So lots of great options in here. You can also give students more time for this, 30 seconds, 15 minutes. you can come in here and you can do, I can't do AI because this question is not supported by Quizizz AI, which is odd because it's a multiple choice. I feel like that can't possibly be correct, but I could actually duplicate this and change it. What if you wanted more than just multiple choice questions? You could come in here and you could do, let's try and add similar questions, or I can do reduce options. I can convert to, ooh, let's do this, convert to other question types. We couldn't enhance this. Okay, this could be an error on our end because right before this call, I did have a little bit of panic because our platform went down and we got it up and fixed it really quickly. But it could be that we're still seeing some residual errors. But yes, you can come in here with these options and you can convert to other question types. And you should be able to take things like these images. You could put an image on a draw it question, have students draw something on there for you. There's a lot of options here. I want to go back though and say, you know, we've covered our generating. We've talked a little bit about searching for resources with standards. And what I'd love to ask you right now is what resources are hardest for you to find as a teacher? Like, tell me, what things do you usually miss? Can you have more than 15 questions? Absolutely, you can. So hit me up with this question. What resources are hardest for you to find as a teacher here? Like, what things are missing for you? Is there an area that you always struggle with? I know teaching elementary, the hardest things for me to find resources on were social studies because our social studies curriculum was like 15 years old. And so I was constantly doing what somebody mentioned earlier, which is spending hours to try and find social studies content that felt like it was current or relevant or interesting and wasn't just a textbook. Finding matching questions, higher level DOK questions for math. Love this. Things to help with engagement, questions with pictures, graphs, and charts. So in our accommodations options, there's a couple of ways where you can bring in charts and graphs and pictures. In our accommodations, one of the accommodations work is that Desmos calculator. So those are built right in for you. Then the other options that we have a math graphing question. So you could actually go into Quizizz and just make a graph. Let's look right now. Let's pick an assessment and then I'll pick questions from scratch. So we've got all of these question types here. It's giving me a prompt because I haven't been on the screen in a couple of days, but you can see that we've got a math graphing question. So with this question type, you can have students plot directly in the question. You could also use something like a Desmos calculator. We've got those built into accommodations. You can bring them in with your own link if you would like. But this is a great way to do a little bit of that charting. The other way that I used to do it all the time as a teacher was with a drawing question, because you can add any background to a drawing question and upload something in there and ask students to interact with it as a drawing. We don't have to just use drawings for SEL. I use them for math all the time. Reading more of this. It also looks like AI didn't want to work on that question because it had an image and we're not there yet, even though we are releasing things like that. Thank you for letting me know. A reliable current events website, that's missing for you. An undo button for lesson creation. I'm happy to tell you we're working on that right now because we definitely need that. These are great answers. But outside of us and things that we should have in Quizizz, we can also have things that are just hard to find as a resource, as a teacher. Experiments for students who are on a modified curriculum. That's such a good call out. Items on your subject because it's an elective. Absolutely. I went to school to become an art teacher, and there were definitely no schools buying art curriculum. And so we constantly had to come up with our own curriculum and just align it to the standards. And that's really, really difficult because if you're teaching something like an elective, you have standards. and no resources, no curriculum. In Quizizz, though, you can often find a lot of things within our library. Like one of the things that I would do here is actually go in and I might look up like art history and just Google, or not Google, but search in here and see, hey, is there anything for art history that I could pick and see what grade levels these align to and see if there's anything that I could use. So if you do teach an elective, this is a great website option for that. I love this website in here too by Angela. There's a current events by the day, which is awesome. And you can bring in websites just like Angela shared that help you right here in Quizizz. Like you can take a website like that, bring it into a passage, bring it into another question, build an entire quiz around what students might be reading on like a website just like that. All right. Now, I've asked you my question, and I'm actually going to pass this to Justin here, I'm going to let him share his screen. And he's going to take us through a little bit of reports with his sidekick there.
Yeah, we'll have to get a W-2 for my son here, Carrie. I hope that's okay. Hi, everybody. I'm Justin. I'm the demo specialist at Quizizz. I apologize. I'm pulling dad duty on top of demo specialist duty. So please bear with me. But the one thing I wanted to show you, oh, by the way, this is Mason. The one thing I wanted to show you is I was a former special ed teacher before I came to Quizizz. And the great thing about the report system that Quizizz has is that whatever you send out to your students, you can, hi, buddy, you can go ahead and then have it generate a report telling you exactly what standards your students are struggling with. So when it comes time for, oh gosh, parent-teacher conferences, I know we're on Danny Go right now, so I apologize. But if you need help in terms of being able to articulate at parent-teacher conferences what standards is a child having trouble with or struggling with, if you're at an IEP meeting and you want to be able to justify whether or not maybe a certain goal should come off of, you now can point to this and have all this data surfaced for you, which is awesome because trying to find that data yourself and be able to dig through it is really time consuming. So I'm going to share my screen. Here we go. Oh, I think I have to send a request to either Carrie or Gabi to share. There we
I
go.
got it for you.
Perfect. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Okay. So we're going to go here, and you should be able to see my screen right now. This is what the basic Quizizz screen looks like. I know Carrie showed that earlier today. But once I have my data, or my assessments that I've pushed out, if I go into the Reports tab, you'll see here, here's all the information of all the different quizzes I have running with our colleagues. I make them take a bunch of random quizzes to get data on them. But in particular, we have one right here that I created on inferences and textual evidence. So if I go ahead and click on that, what's really cool is it surfaces some early, very top level data right off the bat. And so first off, we can take a look at how my class did. We got accuracy, we have their completion rate. So I might need to talk to my students about, only about a quarter of them took it so far. So we might need to go over that. It'll then tell me how many students had it assigned to them and how many questions there were. If I scroll down a little bit further, first off, it's going to show me exactly how they did. It's going to tell me how many times they took it. Oh, buddy, you are so much fun. But the great thing is if my students took it, I can click on Analyze with AI, and you are going to see right off the bat here, it's going to tell me what areas my students struggled with. So this quiz was on inferences and textual evidence. 4 students struggled with making inferences about character traits. So if I click on that, not only will it tell me, it'll also give me the names of those students that struggled. So right now, I know what groups I need to pull for small group time and be able to build those foundational skills. And on top of that, I can also hit find practice quizzes, and it will start to surface quizzes that my students might need to take in order to build that additional practice, or I can assign it for homework. All right. So right there, I can assign it to them very easily. And then lastly, this is the most important part as a former SPED teacher. These were standards I tagged in my assignment, and it tells me exactly how my students did. So right now, Common Core State Standard Reading Literature 6.2. Yes, that is Danny, you're right. Determining a theme or central idea. I know that 88% of my students were able to accurately do that. And if I go down a little bit further, I now have a list of all my students, what standards they did, and how they scored. So this is perfect with Thanksgiving coming up. Usually that's a time for parent-teacher conferences. I can have, if I'm sitting across the table from a teacher, or I'm sorry, not from a teacher, from a parent, I can screenshot their students' data and be like, all right, if I look at Kyle's, well, for RL 6.1, he was in the 60th percent, he scored 60%. But if we look at RL 6.2, he scored 100%. I can kind of build out a plan of what I want those students to do in order to help them out. So again, going back to that timepiece, and I know Carrie touched on it earlier, teachers are swamped, whether it's bus duty, recess duty, lunch duty, multiple preps. I know there was one year I had like 3 preps in middle school and I had all these different additional duties. Your time is limited as a teacher, so why not use something that can surface all this data for you, and then you can use your best practices to figure out how you want to tackle it going forward. So there you go. And of course, he stopped crying as soon as I finished. That's just how life works, I guess. So again, I apologize, but I hope that made a little bit of sense. Like I said, it's a complete game changer in terms of being able to show parents, SPED personnel, or just admin in general, like Carrie mentioned earlier, if you want to be able to point to your curriculum or your materials and be like, hey, this is tied to my state standards or my curriculum standards, you're good to go and you're golden. So, Carrie, I'm going to throw it back to you before he starts screaming again. So, I apologize, everybody.
Thank you, Justin.
You
Poor
are
Justin.
welcome.
I made him do this very last minute with us. But one thing I loved about that screen too, when you can see how everything is categorized on there in those different colors. If you are maybe an elementary teacher doing standards-based grading, maybe you're doing competency-based grading because that's changing in your district, it should be really easy to take that standards-based report and actually come away with, you could go with percentages if you wanted to on these standards. You could take that green, red, orange, change it to your 1, 2, 3, 4 grading if that's what you're doing. And so it's really easy to take that and apply it anywhere else that you need to report on those. And like Justin said, you can share that with, your principal to say, hey, I'm using a resource. It is really standards aligned, I promise. Even though I'm deviating from our curriculum, I've got this thing. You can also take those standards-based reports, and one thing I would have used them for was bringing them into, like an MTSS committee or something like that if I needed to, because it's so important that we have an opportunity to do that and say, hey, look, the student is not mastering this. And being able to show a body of evidence like this student has consistently performed too low on my reporting. And this way you can showcase reports that aren't just anecdotal information, they're actually aligned. So right now, I believe standards-based reporting is, I think it's free for everybody to try on the product. So you should be able to check this out, use it. The more that you can create something that is aligned to standards, the more you'll be able to see that type of reporting available in the product for you. So, would love to get your feedback here on some questions. How would you feel if you had something like this that could surface that data on all of your students and the standards that they know easily? Would this make your life amazing, terrible? Maybe you don't like data. Um, okay, maybe you're apprehensive. You've only got a few seconds to answer, so you've got to be super quick. But I would love to know, because to me, this is such a great way to take that evidence and to actually start doing, data-driven instruction by bringing in all of your data, being able to easily showcase it, and making sure that that data is standards aligned. Because oftentimes data with just various instructional resources or curriculum resources isn't always aligned to standards. It'll show you what students know and don't know, but it's not aligned to those standards. So it looks like, okay, we've got one okay in here. Shout out to a person who was just like, that's fine. Everybody else was like, amazing. This would make me feel good, because you can teach with confidence, knowing that if you're using something outside of your product, or if you're bringing in something like somebody mentioned earlier, you're bringing in your Go Math curriculum into a tool like Resources, you can continue to showcase that that is standards aligned and that you're using your curriculum with fidelity. So my very last question for you all, and then after this, I might open it up for a little bit of Q&A, is how else would your students benefit? If you could automate standards alignment on your resources and dream big, how would your students benefit from something like this? You've got a little over 2 minutes. You can type your response for me. I would love to know. I think for me, one of the biggest benefits when I was a teacher would have been being able to, if I noticed a trend with a student who was performing below grade level, being able to take these reports into an MTSS committee and say, hey, I really need us to pay attention and just progress monitor the student better and make sure that we're giving them the right levels of intervention. This would have been such a great advocacy tool for me to use because sometimes those conversations are hard, especially with those students who are right on the edge where you're like, I know something isn't clicking for them, but I don't know exactly what. This would be a great way to know exactly what is missing. I like this, making sure they can see the targets and verbalize them. If their teacher is less stressed, spending so much time planning, teachers able to spend more time with students and be able to provide intervention sooner. Absolutely, I love that. Because the sooner we can provide intervention to our students, the more likely it is that they're going to succeed. If they missed a question, another standards aligned question could come up so they have another chance to get it correct. That's absolutely right. Making sure that everything is covered. It can help you use your resources better to help students focus on specific areas of need. They would just learn more. I love this. It's very direct. It could help with writing a plan during an intervention or IEP because you can get really specific about those gaps. That's amazing. Um, yeah, they will achieve and excel in every standard if I know exactly what they, if I get to know what do they need to learn. And I love that because I think that is one of the hardest parts. If you're teaching huge classes of students, you don't always know for sure exactly what standard students are struggling with. And since so many of our standards just build on prior knowledge, being able to identify even just one standard and saying, oh my goodness, my students can't figure out this standard, they're really struggling with it. That explains why they're figuring out a standard that covers something that builds on that knowledge. It's going to help you pinpoint that misconception. Everything would be exactly what they need, right? You can get more customized, more personalized with everything that you're doing. You've only got 15 seconds. But I love this. Less stress on you to come up with the questions. Absolutely. If that isn't the biggest benefit to bringing something like Quizizz in the classroom, I don't know what is, because it's hard to come up with new questions all the time. And that is a big way that people are using our AI is just to come up with different versions of something so that students can keep practicing that. So this was my very last question for you all. I'd love to open it up in the chat. If you have other questions, if there's anything that I can quickly show you here on Quizizz, I'm always able to do that. Even Justin is here without Mason right now. So Justin can maybe take a question or two if we need him to. But go ahead, put something in the chat and we'd love to know, what are your questions here? Can we have a link to accommodations features? Absolutely, we can post that link for you right in the chat. If you aren't familiar because you weren't here for the last webinar, we did talk about accommodations, but it's right here in our menu. So you can actually come in here and you can see I've got a bunch of Quizizz employees in here and I can come in and assign any of these accommodations. And you can see that Desmos calculator is in here as well. So some of these are free and some of these are paid. These ones are free because they are the most frequently used ones. Oh, I love this suggestion. Please have tech add a report that will allow me to choose multiple quizzes to generate a standards report. That's such a great option or a great ask. I think we're definitely going to take that feedback back. Is bilingual free? That's a great question, Daphne. It is not free in here, but you know where it is? In any of our generation options. So if you come in here, let's say I'm making something. Let's do my third grade math here again. I'm going to pick this one. What I can do is I can come in here and I can generate my quiz. And so you don't have to do an accommodation if it's not available to you. You can also just come in here, create something new, or find a resource that you already have, and then you can just translate it in here. So one of the ways you could use this is creating a version that's in English and creating a version that is in Korean or Spanish or German or whatever that looks like for you, so that student has something. So they may join from a different code, and that's okay as well. So you can see I could go in here and translate this quiz into any number of languages. I'm looking at our questions here. I had some students. Oh, wait, here. I don't want to miss one. Let me go back up. Because of the 14-hour time difference, you missed the last session. Is there any way for you to make it up as you're very interested in that topic? Absolutely. I think we did. If you're registered for this webinar, you're registered for our series of 3 webinars. So the one that we did last week, you should have gotten an email to watch that recording. If you didn't, you can email support@quizizz.com and we'll send you that recording. Our tests in Spanish, you could certainly put them in Spanish if you would like. I had some students that didn't complete an assignment because the link had expired. I had to go into reports to reopen it. Is there a way to reopen an assignment just for specific students? I actually don't know if I know that question, or if that's the only way to go in and open something. Let's find out. Let's go back into, let's go into something maybe. If you want to reopen something, I feel like you could come into your library here and you could just pick anything that you've done. I could pick this multiplication and division quiz, and I could press play, assign homework, and I can come in here and I could choose my class. So if you have a class set up, then you can come in here and you could assign to that class and pick specific students. So I could just pick Alex and Amber here and then hit next. And I've now given it just to those students. So I think this is a way you could do that outside of the report. Let's see. What excited for leveled variants to expand other subjects. It's a game changer. Yes, Crystal, me too. Can I show how to upload Google Slides to create lessons? Actually, I can show you the easiest way to do that in Google Slides. You can for sure come in here and hit create. You can go to lessons and you can import lessons from Google Slides here. But I actually think the easiest way is to come in and let's see. We're going to go here. Let's pretend I need to make this webinar a lesson again just for you. This is how I did it. I can come in here and I can actually go to my extensions. And if you don't have this added on, you can add on Quizizz for Google Slides, open this. And if you haven't added it on, you'll be able to search and add that. And what I love is it pops up this extension. So I can just make my slides in here and add in my questions as I go and edit them. I think this is the easiest way to create and bring stuff into a lesson. Do you have varied levels of text in Spanish so I can differentiate for my high school Spanish speakers compared to your okay. I actually don't know enough about our varied levels of text in Spanish, or if that's only something that works in English right now. If any of our team knows, feel free to unmute and let me know. And then, ooh, you need Haitian Creole. That's a great request and call out. Allison, you should email support and say, hey, we need this, but I will also pass that on. We've added so many languages. If it's not already in there, it should definitely be in there. Can you just translate an existing quiz? Absolutely. You can take anything in our library and easily translate it. Why can't we create resources from YouTube videos using AI, but it appears other sites can? Any skinny on this? Um, so the way that we've had to work with YouTube is we have to make sure that we're partnering with them and using their platform correctly. And so we have a YouTube for Education partnership that allows us to create resources from YouTube videos. I think there are some limitations from YouTube on how much they allow tools like ours to use AI. I don't actually know a lot of the specifics there. So that's something though that YouTube has a lot of control over, and we have to partner with them however they allow us to. Okay, great. We've got Daphne's question answered. If there are any other questions, I'll give you a minute and I will. Otherwise, we've got our last webinar in this series. Justin is going to be hosting. I'm super excited because Justin is a fantastic webinar presenter. This will be his first webinar to Quizizz at Quizizz. And so on Wednesday, December 11th, we'll be talking about data-driven instruction. So you're going to get to see a lot more of our webinar. Is Mason co-hosting the next session? You know what? I don't know if he is, but Mason is certainly accepting requests, I would say.
Yes, he will not be. I will actually be down in New Orleans for LAQ, and I will be hosting our webinar from LAQ. So if you are going to be at LAQ, feel free to stop by the Quizizz booth, and then I will also be hosting the webinar virtually through Zoom. But no, no Mason on the next one. Sorry, everybody.
Mason may have to make a special appearance. Antoinette, I hope I'm saying your name correctly. Please provide the webinar link. So if you are registered for this one, you are also registered for that one, which means that you'll get an email reminder, you'll get a follow-up with a recording. So you shouldn't have to worry about that at all. You should be all set. And LAQ is actually a curriculum conference based in Louisiana, I believe, is what's happening there. All right. Thank you, everyone. Thanks so much for tuning in. We can't wait to see you in a couple of weeks here. Until then, if you are a celebrator of Thanksgiving, please enjoy a good, wonderful Thanksgiving. If you are not a Thanksgiving celebrator, because maybe you are in another part of the world, then I will wish you a happy National French Toast Day instead, because that is the same day as Thanksgiving, so you can enjoy some French toast. Enjoy your break though, teachers. If you get one, you deserve it. Maybe you're going to eat French toast instead of turkey. So we'll see you after break.